The culture at the Community Charter School of Cambridge is intimate. We make sure that one of our goals is that every student is known really well by at least one adult. And in most cases, students have really positive relationships with 3 to 4 to 5 different adults in the school. And we make that happen by making sure that we're not just focusing on learning outcomes, but also focusing on relationships and community building.
I'm Becky Norris, and I'm the middle school principal at Community Charter School of Cambridge. We don't just keep our expectations really high, but we also keep our levels of support really high. We believe very strongly that it's easy to have a school with high expectations and not high levels of support, and that's a school that ends up pushing out kids who are struggling. And it's also really easy to have a school that has very high levels of support but not really high expectations, and that doesn't benefit students and help prepare them for the real world.
My name is Katie Reiser. I'm the Dean of Curriculum and Program here at the Community Charter School of Cambridge. So our DDI program started here 5 or 6 years ago, I believe. Our Dean of Curriculum at the time read a book by Paul Bambrick-Samtoyo, who's the, I think, Chief Operating Officer at Uncommon Schools. He wrote a book called Driven by Data, which basically outlined a system of taking data based on assessments and then planning backwards from that data.
And so the idea is that throughout the year, you are finding ways to gather data on how students are doing, what they're struggling with, where they're succeeding, and shepherding teachers through the process of identifying areas of weakness so that they can reteach those areas to students. There are just some topics where students need to hear it more than once in more than one different way. So our first year of doing data-driven instruction, we already had midterms and final exams as a school. And so in addition to these 2 big tests that students across the school were taking every year, we added in 4 more interim assessments that first year and tried to evenly space them throughout the year.
We gave the assessments within students' academic classes, and then we released early on a Wednesday and would have teachers stay and analyze the data the week after the assessments were given.
We started to assess how that was going by listening to teachers, sometimes casually asking teachers, how is this going? How are you experiencing this? We also gave surveys about it. And so what we started hearing from some of these teachers who started to really buy into the process was we're testing as a school too often, where we all have to stop together and take a test together. And I'm using data all the time anyway. So over the years, we've done a lot of adjustment of our processes in response to that feedback. And as the years have gone on, teachers have become more and more comfortable using data on a really regular basis. We cut the number of interim assessments. We have 4, including final exams and midterms now. And so if you consider the ones that are not at the very end of the year to be truly interim, then we only have 3 interim assessments in a year.
The way that we use that data is we gather about 4 to 5 days after those assessments are administered to students, and we work in teams with the other teachers who teach the same course as us, as well as any learning specialists who work with our special education students. And we look for patterns, we look for gaps, we celebrate with the kids the things that go really well, but like a lot of places who are very hungry for achievement, we look particularly at the places where we didn't do well, and we try to figure out why. So we'll take an individual question and look at what types of incorrect answers our students were giving, and if there was a pattern to that, so we can see where the misconception lies. And then as a team, the 2 to 4 of us will brainstorm ways that we can present that material to the students in a different way that will help make that misconception clear to students so that they don't make it in the future. During that time, we might actually even produce some of the problems that we're going to have them work on during that reteach lesson. And more importantly, we come up with how we're going to reassess that our reteach actually worked. So we'll make sure to schedule in a future assessment, whether it's a quiz, a test, or another major benchmark assessment, when we'll go back and see if our reteach actually worked.
I think every time a teacher is asked to look at a group of assignments, exit tickets, essays, do-nows, and instead of just grading them for students' benefit, every time a teacher is asked to look for one particular thread and make some action steps based on it, they can begin to see the power of the patterns that are existing in the work that they're doing with students. Teachers are more and more and more excited to use the data that they have as data so that their teaching gets better.
When I was a teacher for 6 years at CCSC, we had an evaluation system that looks really similar to what a lot of traditional schools do, where twice a year a teacher would get an announced full period pre-planned observation with an administrator. Some more experienced teachers got it less than that, once a year or only once every couple of years. And they would debrief that observation afterwards, and their entire evaluation for the year would be based on these 1 or 2 observations. And that was a way that we could check off a lot of boxes on an evaluation form, but it wasn't growth oriented at all. It didn't help teachers to get better if this was only happening once or twice in a year. And it didn't feel very authentic. I could find out that next week is my big evaluation observation, and I could plan the most amazing lesson of the year, but it doesn't say much about how I'm doing day in and day out with my students. And so my final year as a teacher here, we started a committee with a bunch of teachers and administrators who opted in, and we spent the year looking at how some other schools did evaluation in a much more coaching-oriented way. And we took what we liked from those models and we created an evaluation system that was coaching oriented. And so we started to visit teachers with unexpected visits every couple of weeks for much shorter periods of time. And then very quickly, within a few days, we would debrief with the teachers and talk about what we had liked, what had worked really well, where the teacher could improve. And then the next visit would be so soon that we'd be able to look for that improvement and always be following up and closing the loop. And teachers loved it, and we did evaluation surveys every year, and teachers said, this is really helping me to grow. I feel supported. It doesn't feel punitive or like somebody's looking over my shoulder, because I feel like this is the person who wants to help me grow and is always pushing me to grow and supporting me.
So when I observe classes, for example, I take data about whether or not I'm seeing what we call heavy lifting, or how much work students are doing in a given class, how much higher order thinking I'm seeing. I record data about our behavior system, whether or not a teacher is giving merits or demerits to students who are performing above or slightly below expectations. I record data about the type of instruction I'm seeing in class. Is it group work? Is it direct instruction? And then I have that data broken out both by teacher and by grade level and by subject. So I could tell you our humanities department right now is doing 75% of time that's direct instruction. And then if I take that 75% number, I might say, you know what, I think the research shows that doing work in small groups or doing work in pairs can be as beneficial, if not more beneficial, to students' learning. So then maybe I plan a professional development that's based on pushing teachers to figure out how to use pairs and groups effectively in their classes, and trying to suss out what it is that makes them nervous about having kids work together.
And as the years have gone on, we've made little tweaks. We do surveys every year to see what's working for teachers and what's not. But we've continued with this coaching model of evaluation. We've brought in more people to be evaluator coaches. It's not just administrators now. We also use department chairs as evaluator coaches. And that's allowed each evaluator to only have a few teachers on their caseload so that they can really spend a lot of time with them and work heavily with them. And a lot of our teachers say it's the #1 thing that helps them to grow while they're here. We had the early years where it was constant school-wide tests, and then we had this middle time where we really got teachers comfortable using data on a regular basis, but it was very paperwork heavy. And now I feel like we've grown up a lot in this data process, where now more experienced teachers who we call stage 2 or stage 3 teachers, aren't having to fill out any official paperwork at all about their use of data. They're just having really regular conversations about data with their evaluation coaches. So I feel like it's a much more mature, we as a school have matured into using data in a way that feels really natural to us and not having to have as many of these unnatural checkpoints.